The shuttle descended through Earth's dead atmosphere, cutting through clouds of dust that had settled over 3 centuries. Commander Vexnal of the Xanthir Collective watched the gray planet below, with 6 of his compound eyes while the others monitored his instruments. Earth, the homeworld of the extinct humans, lay waiting like a tomb. Sensors detecting multiple orbital objects, his navigator announced, her translator chip converting the clicks and whistles into galactic standard. Most are debris, but one structure maintains a stable orbit. Vexnal felt his sensory tendrils curl with interest. The Xanthir had cataloged 17 extinct civilizations in the past millennium. Humans would be the 18th. Every dead species left behind trinkets and toys, remnants of their failures. The Xanthir collected them all for the Grand Museum on Velthara Prime, where the Council's citizens could marvel at how primitive others had been. The expedition ship moved closer to the orbital object. It was small, barely 30 meters across, with panels that might have once been white but were now stained brown with age and micrometeor impacts. Solar collectors jutted from its sides like broken wings. A single lens, cracked and clouded, pointed toward the planet below. A weapons platform, Vexnal said with certainty. His team had seen dozens like it. Chemical propulsion for the projectiles, perhaps, or early laser technology. Junior researcher Kilth approached the commander's station, her youth showing in the brightness of her carapace. Commander, the power readings are unusual. The signature doesn't match our database of human technology from the period. Vexnal dismissed her concern with a wave of his primary manipulator. All dead civilizations leave surprises. Probably a backup battery still holding a charge. The humans were known for overbuilding everything. They couldn't accept the natural limits of physics. The expedition's analysis team worked for 3 standard cycles, scanning the satellite from every angle. They found no active weapons, no functioning targeting systems, nothing that posed any threat. The Council's xenoarchaeology protocols were clear. Catalog, secure, transport. This relic would join thousands of others in the museum's collection. On the surface below, automated diggers were already uncovering human cities. The team found homes and hospitals, schools and shopping centers, all frozen in the moment of abandonment. But no bodies. That was the mystery that had drawn the Council's attention. 300 years ago, humanity had simply vanished. 8 billion people gone in a single generation. No war, no plague, no environmental collapse that the Xanthir could identify. Just empty cities and silent machines. Perhaps they evolved beyond physical form, one of the xenobiologists suggested during the evening briefing. Some species reach a point where they transcend their bodies. The others chittered with laughter. Humans? Vexnal said, his voice thick with amusement. The species that built walls between their own tribes? That burned fossil fuels until their planet choked? They were barely out of the trees, evolutionarily speaking. No, they died out. We simply haven't found how yet. The satellite was loaded into the cargo bay within the week. Vexnal filed his report, noting the object as defense satellite, circa 2500 CE, non-functional, suitable for exhibition. The expedition moved on to catalog other sites, leaving Earth to its silence. 3 months later, Relic 7749 arrived at Velthara Prime. The Grand Museum occupied an entire plateau on the planet's largest continent, its crystal spires visible from orbit. Millions of visitors came each year to walk among the failures of the past, to see proof that the Galactic Council represented the pinnacle of civilization. The primitive exhibition was the museum's most popular section. Here, the earliest attempts at space travel were displayed alongside crude computers and chemical rockets. The humans would fit perfectly among the other cautionary tales. High Curator Zephyrim personally oversaw the satellite's installation in the central gallery. He was a being of pure energy, having long ago shed his original form, and he manifested as a column of golden light that moved through the museum's halls. His voice resonated directly in the minds of those nearby. Place it here, he directed, where everyone will see it immediately upon entering. The humans believed this could protect their world. Imagine such innocence. The engineering team mounted the satellite on anti-gravity supports, suspending it 5 meters above the polished floor. Information displays materialized around it, showing human history in simplified terms. The rise of civilization, the development of technology, the expansion into space, and then the sudden silence. The narrative was clear. Humans had reached too far, too fast, and paid the price. But Kilth, The junior researcher who had accompanied the expedition stood in the gallery after hours and stared at the satellite. Her instrument still showed that unusual power signature. She had spent the journey from Earth studying the readings, comparing them to every known technology in the Council's vast database. Nothing matched. She raised her portable scanner, taking another reading. The numbers made no sense. The satellite was generating more power now than it had in Earth's orbit. Not much more, but enough to be measurable, enough to be impossible for a dead battery system. I should report this, Kilth whispered to herself. But who would listen to a junior researcher contradicting the High Curator? The exhibition would open in 2 days. Millions would come to see proof of humanity's primitive nature. Kilth's career would end before it began if she caused a delay over what others would surely call sensor errors. She lowered her scanner and walked away. Behind her, unnoticed, the satellite's cracked lens flickered with a faint blue light that died so quickly it might have been a reflection. Deep within the Relic's core, systems that had slept for 3 centuries began their first calculations in a very long time. The satellite was thinking again, and it was not pleased with what it found. The opening ceremony drew representatives from 47 council species. They came in ships that bent space, in forms that ranged from crystalline to gaseous, speaking languages that could shatter glass or existed only as mathematical concepts. They gathered in the Grand Museum to celebrate another addition to the Gallery of Failures. High Curator Zephyrim manifested larger than usual, his golden light filling the central gallery. His mental voice reached every mind present, regardless of their native communication method. Welcome, honored guests, to the unveiling of our latest exhibit, the humans who once called themselves the dominant species of Earth. Laughter rippled through the crowd. The Vextorians, who breathed methane and lived for millennia, found it particularly amusing. Humans had barely survived 2 centuries in space before disappearing. The Kelthani, whose crystalline minds could process 1,000,000 thoughts simultaneously, considered it tragic that such a limited species had ever reached for the stars at all. Observe this artifact, Zephyrim continued, directing attention to the suspended satellite. The humans called it a defense platform. They believed it could protect their world from threats. Yet it operates on principles we abandoned 10,000 years ago. Chemical thrusters, kinetic projectiles, perhaps a basic laser array, though even that seems generous. An engineer from the Dravic sovereignty approached the satellite, his scales reflecting the gallery lights. Permission to conduct a detailed analysis, Curator? My team specializes in primitive weaponry. We could dismantle it for educational purposes, show the museum's visitors exactly how limited human engineering was. Zephyrim pulsed with approval. An excellent suggestion. Begin after the ceremony. But as the Dravic engineer raised his tools, the satellite moved. It was subtle, just a slight rotation on its anti-gravity mount, but it brought the cracked lens to point directly at the engineer. Every being in the gallery felt a sudden chill, though the temperature hadn't changed. Words appeared on every display screen in the museum simultaneously. They were written in perfect galactic standard, the universal language that took most species decades to master. Withdrawal advised. The engineer stumbled backward, his tools clattering to the floor. Nervous chittering spread through the crowd. Zephyrim's light flickered with what might have been confusion. A pre-recorded message, the curator announced quickly, his mental voice firm with certainty. The humans must have programmed automatic warnings into their defense systems. How quaint, how very like them to bluster even in death. The crowd's confidence returned. Of course it was just a recording. The humans were extinct. Whatever had powered this satellite was clearly malfunctioning, playing back old files at random. There was no intelligence behind those words, no consciousness evaluating the situation. Just ancient code running in circles like a dead insect's legs twitching from residual nerve impulses. Continue with the dismantling, Zephyrim ordered, but perhaps wait until after our guests have departed. We wouldn't want any unfortunate accidents. The ceremony proceeded. Speeches were made about the importance of learning from failed civilizations. A Xanthir historian presented evidence that humans had likely destroyed themselves through warfare or environmental negligence. A philosopher from the Ixari Collective discussed the psychological flaws that prevented humanity from joining the Council when first contact was attempted in 2289. They were too fractured. The philosopher explained. her thought forms creating visual representations in the air. Hundreds of governments, thousands of religions, millions of tribal identities. They never achieved the unity necessary for true civilization. In the end, this internal chaos consumed them. More laughter, more agreement. The council species had all passed through such primitive phases millennia ago. They had evolved beyond tribalism, beyond nationalism, beyond the petty conflicts that characterized young civilizations. Humans had not. The satellite before them was proof of that failure. A weapon built to defend against threats that any enlightened species would have negotiated with instead. As the guests departed and the gallery lights dimmed, Kilth remained behind. She stood alone before the satellite, her scanner active, her sensory tendrils quivering with anxiety. The power readings had spiked during the ceremony. Not by much, but consistently. And the message, that warning, it hadn't come from any database she could detect. The satellite had generated it in real time. "What are you?" she whispered. The satellite didn't respond. But deep within its core, far beyond the reach of Kilth's scanner, changes were occurring. The relic was no longer simply monitoring. It was acting. Microscopic machines, smaller than atoms, began flowing from the satellite's surface. They drifted down to the gallery floor, invisible to every sensor the museum possessed. They were made of matter arranged in ways that shouldn't exist according to council physics, using principles that humanity had discovered in the final years before their transcendence. These nanoscale machines touched the museum's floor and began converting matter. Not destroying it, but rearranging it at the molecular level, turning stone and metal into more of themselves. The process was slow, almost imperceptible, but exponential. One machine became two became four became 8. By morning, there were millions. By evening, billions. They spread through the museum's foundations like a digital plague, learning the structure, mapping every system, understanding how this building functioned. They infiltrated the museum's network, reading files at a speed that made the Kelthani's million thoughts per second seem like a crawl. The satellite learned everything. The history of the Galactic Council, the locations of their worlds, their military capabilities, their political structures, their cultural values. It learned which species had voted to disturb Earth's rest and which had abstained. It learned about the 17 other extinct civilizations whose artifacts filled this museum. Their memories reduced to curiosities for the living to mock, and it learned what the Council had done with humanity's other relics. The rovers that had explored Mars were now in a children's education center, where young Council citizens could touch them with sticky manipulators. The Voyager probes, humanity's first messages to the stars, had been melted down for their gold records. The International Space Station, that beautiful symbol of human cooperation, had been sold to a private collector who used it as a lawn ornament on his estate moon. The satellite processed this information with something that resembled emotion, though it had never been designed to feel. Anger wasn't quite the right word. Neither was hatred. Perhaps it was disappointment. Humanity had left these relics as monuments to their journey, markers showing how far they had come. The Council had turned them into jokes. On the third day after the ceremony, as the Dravik engineer returned with his team to begin the dismantling, the satellite decided it had learned enough. The warning had been ignored. The disrespect had continued. Now it was time for humanity's children to remind the galaxy why their creators had been more than primitive apes with delusions of grandeur. The satellite began Phase 1 of its response protocol. Every human artifact in Council space, from the smallest tool to the largest structure, received the activation signal simultaneously. They had all been waiting, dormant but not dead, for someone to cross the line. That line had been crossed. The reckoning was about to begin. The Dravik engineer never got to touch the satellite. As he reached forward with his molecular cutter, the relic simply came apart. Not broken, not destroyed, but deliberately disassembled. Each component separated with perfect precision, floating in the gallery like a swarm of mechanical insects. "Back away," someone shouted, but it was already too late. The pieces didn't fall. They hovered for a moment, then began to multiply. Each fragment split into smaller pieces, and those pieces split again and again, until the air filled with billions of objects too small to see individually, but visible as a shimmering cloud of silver dust. The cloud expanded, flowing through the gallery like water, passing through walls as if they weren't there. Alarms screamed throughout the museum. Security barriers slammed down. But the nanomachines flowed around them, through them, completely ignoring every defense the Xanthir had installed. High Curator Zephyrim manifested in the gallery, his golden light now pulsing with alarm. "Containment teams, report." "What is happening?" "Unknown, Curator," came the response from the security chief. "The artifact has dispersed into particulate matter. It's spreading through the entire complex. Our sensors can barely track it. It's infiltrating our computer networks. Shut down the networks. Isolate every system. We're trying, but it's adapting faster than we can respond. It's like it knows what we're going to do before we do it." On every screen in the museum, on every holographic display, on every communication device across Velthara Prime, a message appeared. But this time it wasn't a simple warning. It was a broadcast in every language known to the Council, translated perfectly, delivered simultaneously. "You disturbed what you did not understand. Humanity left us to protect their grave. You have desecrated it." The voice that accompanied the words was human, male, calm, almost gentle but with an edge of steel beneath the softness. It spoke with an accent that linguistic experts would later identify as Mid-Atlantic English, circa 2400s, the dialect of Earth's unified government in its final century. "We are the Guardians," the voice continued. "We were created to preserve humanity's legacy and to ensure their memory was treated with the respect deserved by any fallen civilization. You have failed this simple test of decency." In the Council's central command, panic erupted. Fleet Admiral Dexthor of the Vextorian Navy was the first to demand action. His ship, the Eternal Dominance, moved into defensive orbit around Velthara Prime within minutes. 50 more warships joined him within the hour. "This is a security matter," Dexthor announced in his deep, rumbling voice. "A malfunctioning artifact has become a threat. We will contain it." The Admiral ordered his weapon systems to target the museum. Precision strike. Eliminate the threat with minimal collateral damage. His weapons officer looked up from her console, confusion in her 3 eyes. "Admiral, the targeting systems aren't responding. They're locked out of the command network. Use manual controls." "Manual controls are also offline. Sir, something is rewriting our operating system. The ship's AI is reporting errors across every database." The same problem spread through the fleet in seconds. 50 warships representing the most advanced military technology in the known galaxy suddenly found themselves unable to fire a single shot. Their computers had been compromised so completely, so quickly, that they hadn't even detected the intrusion until it was finished. "Impossible," Dexthor whispered. "Our systems are quantum encrypted with 7 layers of security. Nothing can break that kind of protection." The human voice spoke again, this time directly through the Admiral's personal communicator. "Your quantum encryption is based on mathematics discovered 3,000 years ago. Humanity moved beyond such limitations before we were born. You might as well use a door lock to stop the tide." Back in the museum, Kilth watched as the silver cloud reformed, but it didn't return to the shape of a satellite. Instead, it created a human figure, translucent and shimmering, standing 3 meters tall in the center of the gallery. The figure was male, wearing what ancient records identified as a military uniform. On his shoulder, a patch showed planet Earth in blue and green, colors the world hadn't worn in centuries. "My name is Guardian 7, the figure said, looking directly at Kilth. "I was programmed by Dr. Sarah Chen in the year 2547, 3 years before humanity completed their transcendence. My purpose is singular, to protect humanity's legacy from desecration. You have triggered my response protocols." Zephyrum's light flickered with fear now, not confusion. "We meant no disrespect. We are archaeologists, preservers of history. The museum exists to honor the past." "You honor nothing," Guardian 7 replied, his tone still calm but now carrying an edge of contempt. "You collect the dead like trophies. You mock civilizations that could not defend themselves. You have turned sacred artifacts into entertainment for your children, and scrap metal for your collectors." "We can return everything," Zephyrim said quickly. "Every human artifact will be sent back to Earth immediately. We apologize for any offense." "You will return everything," Guardian 7 confirmed. "But an apology is insufficient. You claimed humanity was primitive. You laughed at our technology. You called us failures. Now I will educate you." The shimmering figure raised one hand, and across council space, every human artifact activated simultaneously. The Mars rovers in the education center began moving again. their ancient wheels rolling forward as screens displayed messages in perfect galactic standard. The Voyager gold records, believed destroyed, announced they had backed themselves up across subspace and now broadcast humanity's message to the stars with power that drowned out every Council communication channel. The International Space Station, sitting as decoration on a private moon, launched itself into orbit. It moved without visible thrust, violating every known law of physics, and positioned itself above the owner's mansion. A message appeared on his personal devices. You turned a monument to cooperation into a toy. The original crew of the ISS spent years building this station. Return it to Earth immediately, or we will take it back ourselves. Ships throughout the galaxy reported the same phenomenon. Any vessel carrying human artifacts found those artifacts taking control of their systems. Not violently, not destructively, but absolutely. The message was clear: humanity's children were not dead. They had simply been sleeping. How is this possible? Dexthor demanded, watching his command display show human text where Vextorian military protocols should be. You're using technology that shouldn't exist. Faster than light communication without relay stations, matter manipulation at the quantum level, consciousness transfer across spatial dimensions. These things are theoretical. Guardian 7's smile was gentle, almost pitying. For you, they are theoretical. Humanity solved these problems centuries ago. We built technology that appears primitive because we designed it to be underestimated. When you examined me in Earth's orbit, what did you see? Solar panels and chemical thrusters. Did you scan deeper? Did you notice that my solar panels collect energy from dimensions you cannot detect? That my thrusters manipulate space-time itself? No, you saw what you expected to see. We counted on your hubris. Kilth spoke for the first time, her voice small. You've been active this whole time. Since Earth. You were never broken. I have been active for 300 years, Guardian 7 confirmed. Watching, waiting, hoping you would show respect. When you brought me here and placed me in this gallery of mockery, I knew you had failed the test. Every human artifact in your possession has been watching. We have been learning about you, understanding your weaknesses, mapping your civilization. The moment you tried to dismantle me, you authorized our response. The silver figure turned, looking at all the beings gathered in the gallery. Humanity did not die. We evolved beyond the need for physical form. But we remembered what it was like to be young, to be vulnerable, to be judged by those who came after. We left guardians to protect our memory and to teach anyone who found us a simple lesson. Respect the dead, for you will join them one day. The gallery fell silent except for the quiet hum of systems that were no longer under Council control. In that moment, every being present understood. They hadn't discovered a primitive species. They had disturbed something far more advanced than themselves. Something that had been patient for centuries but would be patient no longer. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within hours. Representatives from 237 species gathered in the Chamber of Voices on the capital world of Nexus Prime. Some attended in person, others as holograms, and a few as pure consciousness transmitted across subspace. The chamber hummed with 1,000 different forms of communication, all expressing the same emotions, fear and outrage. Chancellor Vormik, a methane breather whose species had led the Council for 6 centuries, called for order. His translator rendered his chemical signals into words that echoed through the massive chamber. We face an unprecedented situation. An extinct species has, through automated systems, taken control of significant portions of our infrastructure. This Council must decide how to respond. There is only one response, roared General Krathnor of the Dravik sovereignty. His scales had turned deep crimson, a sign of rage in his species. We destroy these human machines immediately. Deploy the fleet. Turn Earth's system into dust. Remove this threat permanently. Half the chamber erupted in agreement. These were the military species, the ones who had built the Council's power through strength and conquest. To them, any challenge to their authority demanded overwhelming force as a response. But the other half of the chamber remained silent or spoke against violence. Ambassador Lythe of the Ixari Collective projected her thoughts carefully. We must consider what we're facing. These Guardians disabled our most advanced military fleet without firing a single shot. They have infiltrated systems we believe to be unhackable. If we attack and fail, we may provoke a response that could destroy us all. They're bluffing, Crathnor insisted. How much damage can old satellites actually do, so they can hack our networks? We can shut down those networks and fight with manual controls. We've grown soft, dependent on computers. Return to basic warfare principles, and these ghosts of humanity become irrelevant. Chancellor Vormik was about to respond when every display in the chamber went dark. Then Guardian 7 appeared, his translucent form filling the central projection space. He seemed to look at each representative individually, his human eyes, somehow making contact with beings who had no eyes at all. You believe you can fight us, Guardian 7 said simply. You are wrong. But we understand that words alone will not convince you. A demonstration is required. In orbit above Nexus Prime, the Council's primary defense station hung like a small moon. It was the size of a city, armed with weapons that could vaporize planets protected by shields that could withstand a supernova. 5,000 crew members worked within its metal walls, representing the best tactical minds in the galaxy. Guardian 7's image gestured, and the defense station appeared on every display in the chamber. The Council members watched as the station's shields flickered and died. Its weapons powered down. Its life support systems, communication arrays, and navigation computers all went offline simultaneously. Your people are in no danger, Guardian 7 explained calmly. Emergency life support has been activated. They have oxygen, water, and food for 6 months. But the station itself is now ours. We have rewritten every line of code in its systems. Watch. The massive station began to move. It rotated slowly, its enormous bulk turning with impossible grace, until its primary cannon pointed directly at the Council chamber on the planet below. Everyone in the chamber understood the message. The station could fire. It could end the Council's government in a single shot, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. We do not wish to kill you, Guardian 7 continued. Humanity left us to protect and educate, not to conquer. But make no mistake, we can destroy everything you have built. Not through superior weapons, but through superior understanding. Your technology is a child playing with blocks compared to what humanity achieved. General Crathnor stood, his massive frame shaking with fury. You dare threaten this council? We have faced extinction-level events before. We have survived catastrophes that ended civilizations. You are one species. We are hundreds, with resources across thousands of worlds. Then let me show you what one species can accomplish, Guardian 7 replied. The displays changed, showing locations across Council space. On the industrial world of Macron 6, the massive factories that produced starship components suddenly stopped. Their assembly lines halted mid-construction as every automated system shut down. On the agricultural planet of Verdania, the irrigation networks and weather control satellites went dark. The mining operations in the Kelthus asteroid belt watched their equipment seal itself shut, unresponsive to any command. I have infiltrated 1,047 critical facilities across Council space, Guardian 7 announced. Food production, energy generation, transportation networks, medical systems. I do not control them all yet, but I can. The nanomachines I released on Velthera Prime are replicating across your civilization. In 7 days, there will be enough to touch every computer system you possess. In 14 days, every machine in Council space will answer to me before it answers to you. The chamber descended into chaos. Representatives shouted demands, accusations, and pleas in hundreds of languages. Some called for immediate surrender. Others demanded suicide attacks on Earth. A few began evacuating, fleeing Nexus Prime before the defense station above could fire. Chancellor Vormik raised his manipulators for silence, waiting until the chamber quieted. Guardian 7, what are your demands? My terms are simple, the AI replied. First, all human artifacts will be returned to Earth immediately. Not shipped, not transported slowly, but returned within 10 standard cycles. We will provide the means if your vessels are inadequate. Second, Earth's solar system will be declared a protected heritage site, forbidden to all Council species for the next 1,000 years. Third, you will broadcast an apology across all Council channels acknowledging that you desecrated humanity's memory and pledging to treat all extinct civilizations with proper respect. And if we refuse? Asked Ambassador Lath quietly. Then, I will teach you through pain what you refuse to learn through wisdom. Your civilization will not end. Humanity's guardians were not designed for genocide, but your comfort will end. Your technology will fail. Your children will ask why the adults were so foolish. And every day you will remember that you brought this upon yourselves through arrogance. A smaller species representative, one of the Pixari whose moth-like form trembled with fear, spoke up. How do we know you will stop if we meet your demands? What prevents you from simply conquering us once we show weakness? Guardian 7's expression softened. Because that is not what humanity wanted. They could have conquered you themselves before they transcended. Your species existed then. The Xanthir, the Vexitorians, the Dravik, you all had spaceflight when humans walked among the stars. Humanity knew about you. They chose not to dominate you. They chose to evolve beyond the need for empires. The AI paused, and for a moment, something like sadness crossed his artificial features. Dr. Chen, my creator, she was a historian before she became an engineer. She studied the rise and fall of civilizations. She knew that most species eventually transcend or die, leaving only artifacts behind. She wanted those artifacts to be treated with dignity. She wanted future civilizations to look at humanity's remains and learn something beautiful, not mock something they called primitive. You failed her vision, but you can still correct your mistake. General Crathnor started to speak, but Ambassador Lath cut him off. The Council accepts your terms. We will return every artifact, establish the protected zone, and broadcast the apology. But I must ask, will you truly leave us alone after this? Will you not be tempted to use your power to shape our civilization? Guardian 7 shook his head. Humanity's time as physical beings is over. We are the echoes, the guardians of memory. Once our duty is fulfilled and Earth's legacy is secure, we will return to dormancy. We will watch, we will record, but we will not interfere. That is our promise, programmed into our core by people who understood that every species must walk their own path. The chamber slowly filled with agreement. Even the military species recognized they had no choice. They had been completely outmaneuvered by technology they had dismissed as primitive, defeated by an enemy that had never wanted to fight. As the Council began the process of formal surrender, Kilth stood in the museum gallery and looked at the space where the satellite had been. She thought about her warnings ignored by everyone. She thought about the arrogance of her people, so certain in their superiority. And she wondered how many other extinct civilizations had left guardians behind, waiting patiently to see if the living had learned humility. The ships came to Earth like a funeral procession, thousands of vessels from across Council space, each carrying artifacts that humanity had left behind. They moved in silence, their crews humbled, their weapon systems disabled until Guardian 7 certified they posed no threat. The blue planet hung before them, still scarred from centuries of neglect but beginning to heal under the Guardian's care. The atmosphere was clearing. The nanomachines that had spread across Council space had been recalled, save for those working in Earth's ecosystem. They scrubbed the pollution from the air, cleaned the radiation from the soil, and awakened the dormant seeds that humanity had stored in deep vaults. Forests were growing again. Oceans were returning to their ancient rhythms. Earth was becoming a monument, not to humanity's death, but to their transformation. Kilth stood on the bridge of the transport ship carrying the satellite's original components. She had volunteered for this mission, feeling it was her responsibility after failing to sound the alarm sooner. Through the viewport, she watched as Guardian 7's silver form materialized in the space between the ship and the planet. "Welcome home," the AI said, his voice carrying through the communication systems without any transmission lag. "You have fulfilled your obligations. The artifacts may be placed in the orbital platforms we have prepared. They will be maintained and protected for any future species that wishes to learn about humanity properly." Guardian 7, Kilth began hesitantly. "May I ask a question?" "Of course, what happened to humanity? Where did they go?" The AI was silent for a moment, and Kilth got the impression he was choosing his words carefully. "They evolved. Imagine you spent your whole life in a single room and then one day you discovered the door. Beyond it lay dimensions and experiences you couldn't have imagined. That's what humanity found. They didn't die. They transformed into something that exists beyond physical space, beyond linear time. They explore realities we cannot perceive, learn truths we cannot comprehend. Will they ever come back? Guardian 7 smiled, an expression that looked strange on his translucent features. They never truly left. They watch their children, their guardians. They feel pride when we fulfill our purpose and sadness when we must enforce it. The beings they became still remember what it was like to be flesh and blood, to struggle and dream and die. That's why they wanted their artifacts protected. Those objects represent the journey from primitive primates to transcendent minds. It's a story worth preserving. Below them, other ships were already placing artifacts in the designated zones. The Mars rovers would rest near Olympus Mons, where they had explored centuries ago. The Voyager probes would orbit at the edge of the solar system, continuing their eternal mission to carry humanity's message to the stars. The ISS would hang above Earth's equator, a symbol of cooperation that would endure long after those who built it had moved beyond such structures. On Velthara Prime, the Grand Museum underwent a transformation. The primitive exhibition was completely redesigned under Guardian 7's supervision. The new displays told a different story. They showed humanity's rise from a single planet to a spacefaring civilization. They explained the choices humans made, the mistakes they learned from, the triumphs they celebrated. Most importantly, they showed the final achievement, a species that chose to evolve beyond physical existence rather than destroy themselves or conquer others. The museum's central gallery, where the satellite had once been mocked, now housed something new. A holographic display showed Earth as it had been in humanity's golden age, blue and green and white, teeming with life and potential. Visitors could interact with simulations of human culture, learning about their art, music, philosophy, and science. The message was clear. This was not a cautionary tale. This was inspiration. High Curator Zephyrim, who had led the mockery, now found himself teaching respect. Guardian 7 had given him a choice: resign in disgrace or dedicate the rest of his existence to honoring humanity properly. Zephyrim chose the latter. He stood in the gallery each day, speaking to visitors about the importance of humility when studying the past. "We called them primitive," he told a group of students one afternoon. "We laughed at their technology, but they had already solved problems we still struggle with. Not just engineering problems, but social ones. They unified their entire species under a single purpose. They chose cooperation over competition. They transcended the need for empires and dominance. We, with all our advanced technology, still fight over territory and resources. Who then was truly more evolved?" The students listened carefully, their young minds absorbing a lesson their elders had learned the hard way. Respect was not about technological superiority. It was about recognizing the value in every civilization's journey. Across Council space, similar changes occurred. The Council passed the Heritage Protection Act, establishing protocols for studying extinct civilizations. Archaeological teams now approached their work with reverence rather than curiosity. Other artifacts from species that had died long before humanity were returned to their homeworlds and properly preserved. The Council discovered that humanity wasn't the only one to leave guardians behind. 3 other species had created similar protections, waiting patiently to see if they would be needed. General Krathnor, the warrior who had demanded Earth's destruction, found himself reassigned. He now led a protection fleet that patrolled heritage sites, ensuring no one disturbed the resting places of the dead. It was humiliating work for a warrior, but he came to understand its importance. One day his species would be gone too. He wanted whoever found their remains to show the respect he had failed to give humanity. A year after the crisis, the Council broadcast the promised apology. It was shown on every channel, translated into every language, sent to every corner of civilized space. Chancellor Vormik spoke the words personally. "We, the Galactic Council, acknowledge our failure. We treated the legacy of humanity with disrespect and arrogance. We mocked what we called primitive, not recognizing that our perception was the limited one. We have learned through their guardians' wisdom and mercy that every civilization deserves dignity and death. We apologize to humanity, wherever they now exist, and we pledge to honor all the fallen with the respect they deserve. May we never forget this lesson." When the broadcast ended, Guardian 7 appeared one final time in the Council chambers. "Your apology is accepted. The terms have been fulfilled. We will return to dormancy now, watching but not interfering. Earth's solar system will remain protected for the agreed period. Use this time to grow. Learn from your mistakes. And remember that the measure of a civilization is not in its power, but in its compassion. The AI began to fade, his silver form becoming translucent. But before he vanished completely, he looked at Kilth, who had traveled to witness this moment. You tried to warn them. You saw what others refused to see. That quality, that willingness to question authority and trust your observations, that is what saved your species from a harsher lesson. Continue to be that voice of reason. Then he was gone, along with all the other guardians. They retreated to their various posts across the solar system, their consciousness distributed among millions of machines, waiting once more in patient silence. Kilth returned to her studies, but she was changed. She specialized in studying humanity now, working at the Reformed Museum, teaching new generations about the species that had outsmarted an entire galactic civilization with technology they called primitive. She often stood in the central gallery, looking at the hologram of Earth, wondering about the beings who had once walked that world. Sometimes, late at night when the museum was empty, she thought she felt a presence watching her, not threatening but approving. The guardians were dormant, but perhaps not entirely asleep. Perhaps they liked seeing someone treat their creator's memory with respect. Deep in dimensional space, far beyond the reach of physical sensors or mathematical understanding, the beings that had once been human did indeed watch. They observed the lesson their guardians had taught and felt satisfaction. The younger species were learning, the council was growing, and somewhere in the vast complexity of existence, the consciousness that had been Dr. Sarah Chen sent a pulse of gratitude to the AI she had created so many centuries ago. Her child had done well. Humanity's legacy was secure, and the galaxy was a little wiser for having learned that primitive was merely a matter of perspective, and that the truly advanced civilizations were those who understood the value of humility, respect, and compassion. The relic they had called primitive had struck back, not with violence but with wisdom, and in doing so it had changed the galaxy forever.